It's time to get ready for week 14 of the fantasy season. You need to make the right decision, especially with so many wide receivers to choose from. We're going to go through every matchup to let you know how we feel about all these receivers. There are still two teams on final bye week. It's just the Cardinals and the Commanders. There are still some receivers you don't even have to think about. These guys are must starts. Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman, and Jamar Chase. But before we talk about the wideouts, what about Najee Harris? Do you think he can get 1 yard in this game? Well, if you do, then I recommend you take the higher. If you are a new customer and Underdog, you get that pick. That's right. You sign up for Underdog for the very first time, use promo code ENDGAME. You get Najee Harris going higher than 0.5 total yards. Now you also get a deposit match of 100% on every dollar you put in, up to a $100 limit. So take advantage of all those offers right now. Just sign up using promo code ENDGAME. All right, the Patriots and the Steelers maybe won't be an offensive explosion here, but let's talk about the wideouts that are involved. All right, so I guess in New England, Demario Douglas is worth talking about. That's assuming he even plays after missing last week.
Yeah, I mean, you can't feel great. It was a concussion, so it's not something like a knee and ankle, hamstring, I always say. Like, it shouldn't affect his performance, but Bailey Zappi, the Patriots, yeah, I can't feel great about him. I mean, only if you absolutely need him. In a PPR league only.
Yeah, we don't really even know who the quarterback will be this week. They don't even have Ramondre Stevenson anymore. I like Pop, but this week I just can't. And then the other side, it's going to be Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. So what does that mean for Deontay Johnson?
I mean, you can't feel good. Granted, he scored in garbage time last week with Trubisky, but, I mean, this is the Patriots. It's not a terrible defense. Already couldn't feel good about this offense. Now, against the Patriots, again, I can only put him in the start him if you need him category.
Right. Remember last week was a really good spot against Arizona. This Patriots offense might be the worst in the NFL, but their defense is still pretty good. Deontay is really just a desperation play this week. And now I do like George Pickens a little better with Trubisky as opposed to Pickett, but I don't think I like him enough to start him unless I really don't have a better choice.
Right. I mean, maybe he has a little bit more upside because Trubisky can throw it a little farther, but you're really gambling on that, so only if you absolutely need him.
First Sunday game, Bucks at the Falcons. Well, Mike Evans, there's no reason not to start him at this point anymore. Chris Godwin is a different story. I mean, as great as Evans has been, Godwin has been a pretty big disappointment.
Yeah, you can't feel good about Godwin. I mean, saved you with a 16-yard rushing touchdown. I mean, oh man, like it feels crazy to say, but can you even start Chris Godwin right now? I don't think I can.
Can't think of a reason to. He hasn't done anything to show that he should be in fantasy lineups. Even in great matchups the last couple of weeks where Evans has gone off, he's doing nothing. I don't think he can be in any lineup. Now, Drake London also coming off a big letdown game, but that was against the Jets. Now he gets the Bucks.
Yeah, this is a big bounce back spot for Drake London. If you played him last week, and got burned like I did in a league where I had to play him, don't give up. He should be better this week. I think he's a solid start.
Agree. This could be a big bounce back. I mean, you can never get too invested in the Atlanta offense, especially the passing offense. But I think London could at least approach wide receiver 3 territory. All right, now we get to talk about the Rams and their wideouts going against the Ravens in Baltimore. Well, why don't we start with Puka? Puka Nacua had himself a nice game. Can he do it again?
I mean, can he catch a 70-yard touchdown again? I don't know, but I feel like Puka's one of these guys. You got him. You just kind of have to start him and take the good with the bad.
Look, it's not going to be any tougher than last week's matchup against the Cleveland defense. Baltimore, good, but it's not like they shut down opposing wideouts. So Puka, hard to predict here. He really is, this Rams offense. I'll say at the very least, he is a solid start. And then the real mystery is Cooper Kupp. He scored, but didn't do a whole lot else. What do you do with Kupp at this point?
Yeah, you still can't feel very good. He did score at the very end of that game to kind of save his day, but man, he was doing very little before that. I don't know. Like, maybe you don't have to outright bench Cup anymore, but I'm only going to put him in the start him if you need him category.
I'm probably more optimistic than most at this point. I will say I was encouraged by what I saw last week, not just the touchdown, but he looked fine. Like, health doesn't seem to be an issue. It's really he just needs to get more targets. Will that happen? I don't know. We got to ask Sean McVay. I think this might be a spot where they lean on him more. So, not a must start, but I feel still good enough to put Cup in most lineups. And then for Baltimore, Zay Flowers. I think he's still the lead receiver there. Coming off what, a 2-touchdown game before the bye? Is Flowers in a good spot?
Yeah, that was the Chargers. This is the Rams. I know they're not, like a complete shutdown secondary, but they're also, not horrible. Zay Flowers just kind of is what he is to me. Like, if you need him, you can start him, but that's about it.
This might be a game that is a little disappointing in terms of the scoreboard because Rams do put up points, but man, on the road against Baltimore, not a great spot. I think Flowers is kind of that wide receiver 3 territory in PPR leagues. He does give you a pretty solid floor, but I don't feel that kind of a ceiling. Now, what about Odell Beckham? Is he playable?
Nah, had that great matchup against the Chargers, and Mark Andrews out and did almost nothing. Maybe he catches a random touchdown, but I'm not betting on that. I'm not starting Odell.
Yeah, he definitely let me down in week 12. Should be fully healthy at the very least with a week off, but yeah, he's just kind of a risky flex play. We got the Lions traveling to Chicago to take on the Bears. So I was ready to just kind of forget about Jameson Williams. Then he ripped off that big play, that highlight touchdown. But is that enough to make you want to start him?
No, this is like Chris Godwin, right? Like had that. It was a run for a touchdown, which hey, that's great. And he every now and then he can catch a long touchdown, but if he doesn't do that, you're getting almost nothing. Yeah, I know you think, oh, it's the Bears, he can do it. Maybe not. I'd rather not start him.
No, I'm not going to really even think about Jameson Williams unless I'm desperate. Like, only 2 teams off this week. You shouldn't need a dart throw like this. It's either a big play / touchdown or nothing. So only if you really, really need. And the Chicago side now, Justin Fields should be fully healthy. Darnell Mooney, does he have any fantasy value?
No. Like, even against this Lions secondary, this just feels too deep. I can't do it.
Yeah. Mooney's a guy who will show up once in a while, but this passing offense, far from reliable, so hard pass. Colts going to take on the Bengals here. Let's talk Josh Downs. Let down again in what should have been a good spot. Is he someone we're still considering?
You can consider him, but he's more like a start him if you need him guy now. Had that nice stretch there and then just had 2 great matchups and really didn't come through. So only if you need him.
Yeah, I keep getting the feeling he's one of those guys that once I say, okay, fine, I'm out on Downs, then he'll pop off with this big game. But I won't count on it in my lineup, so probably only starting if you're desperate. I'm not going to say that about T. Higgins. I know he's back and supposedly healthy, but to me, he's just a risky flex play too.
Yeah, very risky here. You'd have to be desperate. I'd prefer not to start T. Higgins.
Next up, we got the Jaguars at the Browns. Now for Jacksonville, on Monday night, we saw Christian Kirk leave with a groin injury. Does that mean Calvin Ridley becomes a really strong start, or are you still worried about the matchup?
Yeah, I'm still worried about the matchup, but you got to like Calvin Ridley a little bit more. He should see some more targets. He's a good start, got upside, but also has risk.
Right, and also you have to consider with Cleveland, Denzel Ward was out last week. Will he play next week? Who knows? A lot of ifs here. So I would just say Ridley is a guy that is going to have risk this week. But if Kirk doesn't play, I think you've got to like him a little bit more. And speaking of risk, Amari Cooper. Again, knocked out early with an injury. This time, something different. It's been ribs with him, then a head injury, shoulder. So if Amari Cooper makes it through the week and is playing, how good do you feel about him, assuming it's Joe Flacco at quarterback?
Well, that's the thing. We don't even know if it's going to be Joe Flacco. Kevin Stefanski hasn't committed. He's banged up. It's the Browns. How good can you really feel? I don't think I can play Amari Cooper this week.
Look, we've said no to Amari Cooper, 3 straight weeks now? I'm not going to say yes now all of a sudden that he's got another injury and it's not like there's anything that's inspiring me to want to play him, so I'll just pass. Now, with that said, Elijah Moore may become more interesting if Cooper doesn't play at all. Got some targets last week. Can you play Elijah Moore?
If Amari Cooper is out and if it's Joe Flacco, I think Elijah Moore is at least startable.
Well, I think with or without Cooper, I think if Flacco's in there, Moore is startable. I'm not going to say you have to, that he's going to smash, but 12 targets last week. We know there's a connection. We know Flacco is not afraid to throw the ball down the field. So if Flacco's in there, I think Moore is at the very least a high upside flex. Panthers at the Saints. Interesting development in week 13. Jonathan Mingo was the top target. Is this something that continues, and does this mean that Mingo has fantasy value?
I mean, it should continue. Like, they should get a look at him. They drafted him this year. They need a wide receiver that can grow alongside Bryce Young. It definitely should continue. I think it will continue. That being said, it's the Panthers. Not a ton of upside here. I'm still not starting Jonathan Mingo.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great spot. At New Orleans, they got some good corners there, so Mingo is a guy who you could break out in emergency, maybe stash, but I don't think you can start him. Now, what about Adam Thielen? Is he just falling off the map here, or does he bounce back?
Yeah, I mean, 2 good matchups in a row has done nothing. Yeah, how can you put Adam Thielen in your lineup this week on the road against the Saints? No way.
I can't. Adam Thielen, look, what we saw this past week actually makes sense for the first time this year. Maybe just coincides with, Frank Reich not being there anymore. Adam Thielen should not be the leading receiver for this team. He should not be peppered with targets, and I don't think he will be down the stretch. So at this point, he's just kind of a low ceiling, barely floor flex. In New Orleans, it's Chris Olave still. He's the guy, but who's the quarterback going to be this week? Do you like Olave in this matchup?
Yeah, I don't think it matters if it's Derek Carr or Jameis Winston. I mean, the guy is a threat to go over 100 yards almost every single week, it seems like. I wish he was scoring more touchdowns. I wish his offense was throwing more touchdowns, but Carr or Jameis, doesn't matter to me. Olave, a good start.
I think I'd prefer if it was Winston at this point. Carr not been great, and you know that Winston will air it out. So either way, Olave is pretty much in my lineups everywhere. Texans taking on the Jets. Really rough to say Tank Dell out for the season. Cannot use him anymore. Good news, if you have Nico Collins, he is going to be a set and forget for the most part. But against the Jets and Sauce Gardner, is it that simple?
It's not that simple, but I think you still got to start them this week. But they are on the road. It is Sauce Gardner. It could be a letdown week. But given the fact Tank Dell is out and how good Nico has been, I think you still need to start him.
It's a road game, and it just so happens to be against the toughest defense against wide receivers. But that said, Nico, for the most part, unless you happen to have really, really high upside receivers ahead of him, you probably still start him. Now, what about Noah Brown? He was back from injury last week and didn't catch a pass. But with Tank out, is he playable?
I think he's at least playable because you look at it, the number 2 wide receivers here typically do pretty well against the Jets because of Sauce Gardner, but it's still not a great matchup, and they still are on the road, so I can only put Noah Brown in the start him if you need him category.
Agree. He's a guy I'm going to like a lot down the stretch after this week. He's still a risky flex option at this point. And then do you think Robert Woods, the veteran there, gets more targets because of Dell being out?
He didn't last week. I am not starting Robert Woods.
I don't even know if he got a single target last week, and I can't remember the last time Robert Woods actually gained any significant yardage. So you would think it might be better for him, but I'm not even rostering him. And then Garrett Wilson, again, don't even know who the quarterback's going to be this week. Does that mean it's just too risky to risk Wilson?
I mean, if they go back to Zach Wilson, I'll actually feel okay about Garrett Wilson. But if it's Tim Boyle or Trevor Siemian, I mean, only if you need him, you can start him.
I don't even know how to answer this. Garrett Wilson is, I don't know. I don't want any part of this Jets offense, just to be honest. I'll just ignore Wilson. Vikings taking on the Raiders. We also don't know who the quarterback for Minnesota is going to be. It's just that kind of a season. Well, good news. Justin Jefferson should be back, and if he plays, I mean, you got to play him, right?
Yeah, he should be fully healthy by now. I mean, I feel like he's close to quarterback proof. I guess we'll find out, but you've been holding Justin Jefferson this long. He's back. You're playing him.
Yeah, I'm not going to overthink this one. If I have JJ, he's in my lineup. Jordan Addison is a different story. Does Jefferson being back help him or hurt him or neither?
Well, if Kirk Cousins was still playing, I'd say it helps them, but it's not Kirk Cousins. So I think it hurts them because now that target share is going to go way down. I can't start Jordan Addison, unfortunately.
No, and it would be a good matchup. This Raiders defense, not the best in the secondary, but just can't feel as much of a ceiling anymore. Even when he was the number one guy without JJ, not putting up big numbers lately, so probably just sit him. Now, what about Devontae Adams? You feel good enough at least about that situation there in Vegas that you're still starting him?
Yeah, we've seen him have some nice games. He gets a ton of targets. It's the Vikings. This secondary doesn't scare me at all. They're at home. I think Devontae Adams is a very good start this week.
Look, Devontae Adams has had plenty of big games this year, even with rotating quarterbacks, even with a rookie in there. This is, I think, pretty much a smash spot for him. Going against the Vikings, they're at home, coming off the bye. Look, I want to start him. That's clear enough. But I'm also going to say underdog right now, if you look at the early line for his pick'em, 68.5 yards. That's nothing for Devontae Adams. I'm going higher. I'm going to take that pick. If you happen to be new to underdog because you're just signing up for the first time, you can take that free pick that we already talked about. You can pair it with this pick or any other that you like, and then you have a good chance to right away win your very first pick. You triple your entry. Just make sure when you sign up for the first time, you use promo code ENDGAME to get that, plus your 100% deposit match. Kobe Myers, did he show enough before the bye to make you think that he could be started?
Yeah, I don't really want to chase that game. I mean, he was doing nothing in every other game with Aiden O'Connell. I think this is a game where we see a big Devontae Adams week. That means probably not a lot of Myers. I'm not starting him.
Well, I don't want to start him, but I don't think he's the worst option either. I actually would say I feel a little bit better about him than like Jordan Addison, but just a flex consideration. All right, next we got another rematch of a Thanksgiving game. Seahawks at the Niners. Seattle hoping it'll go a little bit better for them, but now they're on the road. What about DK Metcalf? DK Metcalf coming off a monster game. Can he do it again?
I don't know. I mean, remember 2 weeks ago against the Niners, he had what, like 3 fantasy points or something like that? Did hardly anything. Now they're on the road against the 49ers, but also it would be hard to bench DK Metcalf after last week, so I don't feel great about him, but I'll put him in the startable category.
You almost can't use the logic of, oh, it's a terrible matchup because he just destroyed the Cowboys secondary. But are we really counting on doing it again? He's always startable because he can always have a game like this, but just be prepared for him to not have a monster game. Now, what about Tyler Lockett? It's been kind of quiet lately.
Yeah, that's kind of what you get with these guys. DK, Lockett, they can have those big games or they can do nothing. So I think Tyler Lockett also startable.
That pretty much defines Lockett's career, right? It's up or down. There's hardly in between. He could put up numbers. Look, Seattle could be putting up numbers in the second half if they're down big, or could do nothing like they did last time. So startable, but risky. Now, Jackson Smith-Njigba, the rookie, he actually had a nice game also against Dallas. But can you feel good about him?
Yeah, I'm not ready to go there just yet with him. I mean, I think he might be coming on, and maybe, next week we're in on him. But this week, I'm going to say, only if you need him.
Yeah, I also don't want to make the mistake I made a few weeks ago and thinking he was starting to kind of take over the number 2, maybe with number 1 role. So I'd prefer to sit JSN if I can afford to. Now, for the Niners, I don't know if we can even consider sitting either of these guys. Let's start with Brandon Ayuk.
Nah, you'd have to have some incredible options to bench Brandon Ayuk. I think this week you got to start him.
Right. He didn't smash last week as somebody else did, but yeah, if I have Ayuk, I'm starting him. Nothing about this matchup is going to change my mind there. And then Deebo Samuel, I mean, sure, he's probably not going to do what he did in week 13, but you can't sit him, can you?
No, you can't sit him. And look, Seattle plays a ton of zone. That's usually where Debo is at his best. So I think Debo also a good start.
Bills at the Chiefs. Could be a high scoring game. I know that's what everybody's hoping for. Will Gabe Davis be a part of the action?
Maybe. I mean, you never know. It's Gabe Davis. You want to put him in your lineup. You want to roll the dice for the big game and risk the 0. Go for it. I'd prefer not to this week.
Yeah, we say that, but it's true with Gabe. We really never know. So you're pretty good at calling Gabe big games. If you're not feeling this week, then I'm not going to feel it either. Khalil Shakir has been more involved. Still feels kind of deep, though, for fantasy in week 14.
Yeah, this feels too deep this week. Only 2 teams on bye. I'm not starting Shakir.
Yeah, and the Chiefs aren't a pushover in terms of their defense. Underachieving on offense, but their secondary is still pretty good. So Shakir, I'm probably just going to sit. And then for Kansas City, unfortunately, I think there's still only one receiver worth considering. It's Rashee Rice. How do you feel about him in this matchup?
Probably the same way I'm going to feel about Rashee Rice the rest of the season. He's fine. He won't kill you. He could score. He's startable.
Yeah, you nailed it. Not the high ceiling, not the lowest floor. Decent wide receiver 3 type. Then on the West Coast, we're going to have the Broncos taking on the Chargers. Let's start with Cortland. Can't stop scoring touchdowns. Sutton. Does he do it again?
I mean, probably. It's the Chargers. It's a great matchup. The Chargers are at home, so you got to think the offense will be better. I think you pretty much have to start Cortland Sutton this week.
It's a great matchup. No reason not to start Sutton. Just cannot stay out of the end zone. I'm not sure how a team that doesn't really score that much seems to have a guy who's going to be one of the leaders in touchdowns. But anyways, Cortland Sutton, yeah, you can just kind of set and forget. And then there's Jerry Jeudy, who I think I can just bench and forget.
Yeah, even in a good matchup like this, cannot start Jerry Jeudy.
Now for the Chargers, I know that offense looked bad last week and kind of struggled. You still want to start Keenan Allen. But do you want to start Quentin Johnston?
No, I mean, guy dropping easy passes every week, it seems like. I mean, you're just asking for pain. Don't start Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, I don't see why anything would change this week. Never starting Quentin Johnston, not this year. Jalen Guyton, this feels like a lotto ticket at best.
Exactly. Way too deep here. Not starting him.
Eagles taking on the Cowboys in Dallas this week. If it's anything like the last time these two teams met, we had a lot of points on the board. Does Devontae Smith sound like a must start?
Yeah, it would be very hard to bench Devonta Smith right now. I mean, even if Dallas Goedert is back, I don't care. I'm starting Devonta Smith.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like he's only benefiting from Goddard being out. This guy, you just don't even question it. Always has big upside. Just start Smith. Now, Brandon Cooks is going to be an interesting one because he's been really good lately, but the last time they played Philly, he did nothing. Do you take a chance with him?
Yeah, the last time they played Philly was in Philly. This is in Dallas, and we know how this offense is at home. I think this week, Brandon Cooks is a good start.
I'm going to agree. Been feeling Cooks lately. I think he could surprise people this week. So you can't say that he's a must start, but I feel good enough to say if I have him, I'm probably rolling with him. And then the first of 2 Monday night games for week 14, it's going to be the Titans taking on the Dolphins. Let's start with D-Hop. Did a little something in week 13. Does he do something more in week 14?
I don't think so. I mean, he feels very touchdown or bust, and now he gets the Dolphins. Look, Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard just held Terry McLaurin to 0 catches. Titans on the road against the Dolphins? No thanks.
Yeah, I don't feel as good about him this week as I did last week, and I didn't feel great about him last week. So, like in a standard league, I think he's flexible, but in PPR, probably not. And Jalen Waddle on the other side, does he smash against Tennessee?
I don't know if he'll smash. Is Jalen Waddle ever going to smash this year? I mean, serious question, just because of the way Tyreek Hill is. But I think this week in this matchup, he's a good start.
It's a good matchup. Yeah, for the most part, I want Waddle in my lineups. Then we got the Packers taking on the Giants. Christian Watson looking like a guy now you just have to get in your lineup, but then, of course, he got hurt again. All right, so if Watson plays, are you just going to do it? Are you going to put him in your starting lineup?
It depends. I mean, if they come out and say, "Oh yeah, it was nothing," like he's fine, it was a cramp or something like that, then okay, sure. But if he's not practicing all week with a hamstring, and then they're like, "Well, he's going to give it a go," I just think it's too risky. Even as good as he's been in a good matchup, so I mean, I don't think he's going to play, so I don't think you have to worry about it. But probably going to have to avoid him this week.
Ah, man. I was just going to say I want him in my lineup if he plays. But it always depends because even if he does play, he could always get hurt again. I mean, I hate to use the word injury prone, but it seems like it really does fit with Watson. So risky, but I'll take the risk. The upside is massive. Now, what about Jaden Reed? He was the guy who was questionable last week and really didn't get involved much in week 13. But what if he's good to go? And well, what if Watson isn't?
Yeah, I mean, if Watson's out, I think Jaden Reed is a very good start this week in this matchup. But even if Watson plays and is limited, I think in this matchup, Jaden Reed is still a good start.
Agree. I think Reed has upside regardless, just because it's the Giants. The ceiling isn't super high, but then again, the way Jordan Love is playing, I think you've got to feel pretty good. I'm going to put him in that wide receiver 3 range. What about Romeo Doubs?
I mean, feels the same as he always does. Touchdown or bust. It is a good matchup. He could score, so if you need him, you can start him.
Great. Don't feel as good about him as Reed, but I would say if Watson is out, you can at least consider him as a flex. And we actually will talk about a Giants receiver this week because before the bye, Jalen Hyatt had himself a nice week. We know that he's got some upside. He's a rookie. Could he get more involved after this week off?
I mean, he could and he should get more involved, but also it's the Giants. I mean, you're really banking on some big plays here. The only 2 teams on bye. I'm not ready to put Jalen Hyatt in my lineups.
No, I'm not ready to put any Giants receiver. We've seen this kind of random big week from like Slayton or like Wan'Dale Robinson, and now it was Hyatt. Not chasing that, not starting Hyatt. All right, now you got the lowdown on all the receivers that you need to know about. We got you covered at every position for start sit. We also have waiver wire, trade, advice, and everything you need to win in week 14. Check it out in this week's playlist.